The US Secretary of State John Kerry says that governments face a tough fight to reach a climate agreement in Paris in the remaining hours of COP21. But he does report that consensus is slowly being built. Achim Steiner is the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme and the Under-Secretary General of the United Nations. He joins us live now from Paris. Many thanks for your time, Achim. There is the real sense, though, that the mood has changed to allow for this agreement that we are all expecting in the next day or so. Why do you think that has happened?
Yes, you're right, Bev. It's palpably close, and I think it is not just a matter of this week in Paris. It is many years of countries realizing, first of all, that the threat and the risk of climate change have become really material to our economies. Secondly, the cost and the price for this transition towards a low-carbon economy keeps on dropping, making it more feasible. And finally, we have seen in the run-up to Paris here, also with the French presidency, an enormous momentum with countries producing their national climate change strategies. Nobody would have thought 6 months ago that we would arrive in Paris with over 185 countries presenting their national climate change strategies. So the conditions in economic terms, the politics, but also the need to move forward are very different settings than a few years ago.
You've spoken and written about how the lives of the disadvantaged are really held in the hands of the advantaged, but even that this agreement could still mean a lot of disruption for disadvantaged people. Explain to us what you mean by that.
You see, I'm the Executive Director of the United Nations Environment Programme, which since 1972 has its headquarters in Africa, in Kenya, Nairobi. All around us we see, first of all, the challenge of a world that is beginning to change as a result of carbon dioxide emissions, of climate change, and yet no one on this continent has had really a material responsibility in terms of these global changes. Droughts, floods, sea level rise, but also the migration of disease, all of these things are affecting people who have very little responsibility and very little means to actually prepare themselves to adapt. Secondly, what we also see with the Climate Convention now is an opportunity. Africa has 700 million of its 1 billion citizens without access to electricity, even today. Renewable energy has suddenly, because of the climate change and mitigation efforts that are being negotiated here in Paris, become an opportunity to leapfrog. And we saw Africa arrive here in Paris this week with an extraordinary offer, essentially saying we are willing to double renewable energy in the next 4 years and build 300 gigawatts of renewable energy infrastructure by 2030, taking Africa out of what has been the energy path of Europe, of China, of Australia over the last 100, 150 years. So that is why both the risk to the more vulnerable, but also the opportunity that is now emerging is so promising and I think so vital to our global collective well-being.
Yes, I think that sense of the renewable sector is really poised now to do something significant is palpable. But I'm wondering about time frames, because this is the critical element, isn't it?
It is indeed, and the emissions gap report which we released just a few weeks before Paris, which looks at where we need to be in terms of a 2-degree world, in terms of actions and where we actually are, clearly points that we still have some way to go. But you know, people often underestimate that once you set the right signal, and I think what will come out of Paris is unquestionably a signal towards a future low-carbon economy, suddenly allows exponential, i.e. ever faster changes to happen. Nobody would have believed that we would have seen half of the world's electricity generating infrastructure built last year across the world being renewable. It would have been considered unthinkable 10 years ago, and yet it has happened. I think we will see an energy revolution beginning to unfold literally within months of Paris having come to an agreement, because investments, technology development and new markets will simply look into another direction, and that is partly why Paris will also have to put in place a review mechanism that allows for the ambitions to be scaled up in a 5-year interval. And in that sense, yes, we could still be on the right track.
And that's such a good point you make, Achim. I guess people are really concerned that there will be some accountability even if this agreement is reached and there is constant progress.
Absolutely. Trust is based on good verification. On the other hand, I think we also need to be clear. We cannot force sovereign nations to do something. Australia doesn't want to be told what to do, nor does China, nor does the United States or Brazil. But I think what has been so remarkable about this climate change convention, which people often criticize for not having delivered one big result, is that it has essentially forced nations to come together year after year, confront the science, understand the risks, and construct a voluntary and ultimately also a legally binding agreement that, yes, may have in a lawyer's definition different elements. But what you will see out of Paris here is a global compact. And that will allow nations to both commit what they're willing to do and able to do, and also do it in the concert with others, which is part of building that green economy that your foreign minister spoke about yesterday as now being something that Australia and the rest of the world is moving towards.
Achim Steiner, we do appreciate you joining us. Thanks for your time.